This is KTN News.
Every young person at some point in their lives will have to make a decision, a life-changing decision on their sexual and reproductive health. Yet, research shows that a majority of adolescents don't have the capacity or the knowledge to make these decisions responsibly, leaving them vulnerable. Comprehensive sexuality education. That's our focus on Health Digest, your authoritative health show, with me, Dr. Mercy Korir. And to start off this show is a story by Mary Mwoki on what comprehensive sexuality might entail and how probably we should approach this particular discussion.
According to a study conducted by Guttmacher Institute in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Homa Bay counties in 2015 on students in Forms 2 and 3, it showed that 26% of the students in the sample, mostly aged 15 to 17 years, had already had sex, 42% of them male and 15% of them female. Contrary to reservations held by opponents of the comprehensive sexuality education, the proposed curriculum is tailor-made for kids and is age-appropriate. Jonathan Wesaya, an education expert, explains more.
So let us not misconstrue it to mean that when a child gets into kindergarten, they are going to start being talked to and taught sex as at the point of entry. The issues that relate to sex, how the sexual organs work, reproductive health, are things that come later in life. And these are skills and knowledge that our learners need to have so that they prepare themselves for life. Because when we talk about the competency-based curriculum, is looking at what is it that the child can do when they are faced with a situation. So parents need to be involved to know so that they do not contradict the information the child has picked in school.
In 2013, the Kenyan government signed a declaration in which it committed to scaling up comprehensive rights-based sexuality education beginning in primary schools. Comprehensive sexuality education is seen as necessary to ensure healthy sexual and reproductive lives for adolescents.
Our children getting sexually active at an early age is already with us. We cannot run away from it. So for me, going forward, it will be that the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development needs to convene a roundtable with the proponents of comprehensive sexuality education and those who are opposing it, and guide us on what elements are going to go into the competency-based curriculum.
While the debate rages on, Itoleka Girls Secondary School in Kitui County has adopted the idea and even come up with sensitization messages based on it.
My girls.
Yes, Madam Principal.
There is an outbreak of teenage pregnancies in Kenya.
As the debate rages on, one can only hope that the final decision arrived at will not disenfranchise the intended recipients. Mary Mwoki, KTN News for Health Digest.
Comprehensive sexuality education, that is our focus, and that story by Mary Mwoki has just given a glimpse of what we will be tackling on this particular show. And with me for this discussion, to my immediate right, is Jacqueline Onyango, who is the Senior Deputy Director, Curriculum and Research Services at KICD, that is the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development. We have Dr. Johnston Kuya, who's the National Coordinator at SRH Alliance. And last but not least is Georgina Obonyo, who is a Project Officer for Youth in Action, AMREF. To start this discussion, I think I'll start with you, Jackie. What is comprehensive sexuality education? Because to many people's minds, and people have interacted with, particularly of the older generation, it's to to them it's teaching kids about sex, teaching children about sex. Is this what CSE is?
Thank you, Dr. Korir. Let me begin by just indicating that the issue of comprehensive sexuality education didn't start just recently. The first time we were met with this issue was in 2005. And I remember UNESCO bringing to us several documents that we were asked to go through as a curriculum institution. And there are certain issues that we were averse to because we have a responsibility to educate our children, but we also have a responsibility to look at what is acceptable in the Kenyan society. There are two specific things that we didn't agree to. One was the age at which these children were supposed to make decisions as to whether they wanted to use contraceptives or not, and the issue of beginning to enlighten them on the issues of condoms so that they can make a choice. And that was the age of 9. A 9-year-old in the Kenyan context is a child of about standard 5. And so we sat back and asked ourselves, what is our responsibility? Yes, we do agree that there is a problem of teenage pregnancy or early pregnancy, either through cultural practices that are part of our tradition, or even sometimes and largely due to lack of knowledge. And so at that point, I can honestly say that we then said this is not the right thing. And we started engaging. And I think for the last, 5 years, because 2014 we even allowed ourselves to be trained. We were taken through what this is about with the simple agreement that fine, let us learn what it is about, but we'll pick what is appropriate for the Kenyan nation. And so for us, yes, there is comprehensive sexuality education, but because of what it denotes, we opted to use human sexuality. So we will teach what we think is appropriate across the board about sex education, which Kenyans don't even want to hear about, because they think when you say sex education, it's about the act of having sex. But there's a lot about it. So what we've settled on is human sexuality for us in education. But yes, the issues of comprehensive sexuality education are still being discussed by Ministry of Health and other players who are still working on those areas.
So to somebody just watching and still wondering, what is it? So that we can understand why it's such an emotive and divisive conversation. What is CSE or what is human sexuality education?
I think human sexuality education is basically progressively helping children to understand who they are. And we are putting it together with life skills education, which we know that in this country we have refused to teach. And yet, it's a part of what the children need to have because it enables them to have the skills that are critical. Why are we saying they need to be aware? It's as simple as just children in standard 1 or even pre-primary knowing that they are boys or girls. All right? That's where human sexuality begins, with your own identity. And so as they grow up, we are progressively then introducing them to different aspects of human sexuality. So I know I'm a girl or a boy. I begin to appreciate that I'm a girl or a boy. And I respect the fact that, and I'm proud of the fact that I'm a girl or a boy. And as we move forward, we're even telling these children, fine, you are going to be taught about your parts of the body. We are teaching them parts of the body because we want them to know even when they are handled inappropriately. And if somebody handles you inappropriately, make sure you tell your teacher, your friend, your parent, or whoever else you trust. And it goes on as they begin getting into teenage, we are teaching them about the changes that are happening in their bodies. And we have to teach them how to be responsible. If you look at a subject like life skills education, that's where we are teaching them how to deal with emotions as they change, how to be able to relate with others, because there are 3 categories of skills. One, the first is the skills of living with oneself and understanding oneself. Self-awareness, who am I? I'm a girl, I'm a boy. Then skills of living and working with others. How do I relate? So friendships, peer association, Then you look at issues of, can I be strong enough to say no or yes? Can I be able to negotiate? And finally, the third category is about making informed decisions, so that in whichever situation you find yourself, you are able to assess that situation and make a decision from an informed point. Now, I think the important thing we need to look at is that for these children to actually make these decisions or even go through those spaces, they need appropriate information. This information should come from the teacher, yes, but it should also come from the parent, because the parent is the first teacher of the child. So as the child is taught in school, they should also find a parent or a family or society that can encourage exactly what they've taught in school, because school actually teaches the ideal. Education is about the ideal, but will also indicate the challenges that make the ideal not be sustainable. So that this child, we are not saying that we'll give all the answers, we can't, but we build in the child the ability to make those decisions at whichever point. So boys and girls, for example, as they get to standard 5, when they are young, they are very close. They'll hold hands, right? They'll play together freely. But as they get to standard 4 and 5, even during a PE lesson, if you ask them to hold their hands, the girls run together, the boys run together. That's already an indication that we are seeing the differences in us, and that's where you begin. Okay. Because now you want to tell them, fine, even if your boys and your girls, holding hands is not a bad thing, and you begin picking up from there as they grow up. Okay. So I think for us what we are saying is based on what education should do, and the fact that for us in education, a child or these children as they come into basic education are children by virtue of the Constitution until they get to 18. We have a responsibility. And so we must be able to teach them what they can do, notwithstanding the challenges that they get. Because remember, it's not always this child's fault. And that's one thing we need to pick up as Kenyans. It is not always this child's fault. Most of the time, these children are actually mishandled and misused by the people they trust most.
Okay. I want to pick the minds of the rest of the panelists. From what she's explained, it's fairly straightforward. And to me, it looks like information that we should start teaching children. And she's graduated it up and it's age appropriate. So why is it a divisive conversation?
I think for me, I will start by saying it's really a shame that comprehensive sexuality education, or whatever name that she has given, is causing a lot of anxiety and problems in this country, despite all the oblivious benefits that come with CSE. So I think for me, what is very important is that the government, I know she might be representing one arm of the government. The government needs to come out clearly on what this human sexuality education is, disseminate this information to the public. Because we see, I work for the civil society organizations sometimes, and we pick the international guidelines of comprehensive sexuality education that she has said. And I think it's very important that she has said that when UNESCO came up with these guidelines in 2005, they had to sit and engage, because the guidelines are meant for countries, and countries need to domesticate them. And I believe that is one of the reasons that UNESCO, even recently, I think last year, revised the guidelines so that it can be able to encompass all those things. Because CSE is information that is scientific, accurate, comprehensive, and covers all those aspects, even culturally acceptable and age appropriate. And we are in a country, I think every panelist will want to talk something about culture, social norm. So, I mean, for me, it is what we need in this country, a myriad of all these problems. So it is just the government to really come up clearly and engage the stakeholders together so that we brainstorm and agree on the way forward. Because even the religious leaders and the institution and the other anti-CSE, I mean, if you engage them, they just have a problem sometimes with the name. They have a problem with things that do not even exist. They are not providing solution. It's just that you are talking about contraceptives. These are young people. And that is not CSE. CSE is about body changes, relationship. How can you be able to really handle all those developmental issues within the body of a child.
What is the issue then with implementation of CSE or human sexuality education? The bottom line is sexuality education. What are the issues or the challenges that are slowing down its implementation?
I think from where we sit and with the experience we've had, it's Kenyans don't want to face issues. Starting from the parents, it's an issue of passing the buck to whoever you want to pass the buck to. And so in this curriculum, and based on the interactions we've had, by the way, we have been able to meet all these players who are dealing with different programs in schools because they are trying to mitigate those programs. We have not stopped the programs. We actually are just evaluating the programs and saying, fine, this can continue, because we know there are programs that are helping the learners. But over and above that, we are saying this has to be a concerted effort. It cannot be at the time children get to secondary school, then everybody's running and telling them what they should do. You see, the background I didn't have, and what you're getting me into may be too late. And so for this new curriculum, this is what we've done. We have got 7 competencies. Away from the usual, the communication and collaboration, we have 2 competencies that we want to ensure the children have. One is learning to learn, and the second one, we are calling it self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is ensuring that you understand who you are and appreciate who you are. You don't start by appreciating yourself, you lose everything. And once you've done that, then we can begin to work with you. And so life skills, which we found has not been being taught in the earlier years, we have mainstreamed it into the rest of the curriculum, because we are saying if this child is allowed, as we said earlier, it should be using learner-centered methodology. If this child is allowed to engage and to ask questions, then they can be guided. But our fear as we do this is that the child will ask questions and again will refuse to answer, right? So we have put another caveat, which we are calling parental engagement and empowerment, because largely, as parents, we have abdicated our duties. And that is why we want the children to be in school, we want them to be in tuition. If they are not in tuition, there's a church seminar you're sending them to, just so that you can keep them away from you. Now, when you do that, definitely, as she says, they are going to learn from their peers. Now, the peers who don't have the right information. So the bottom line is that parents must begin to teach their children. Teachers will do what they need to do in class, but even we as a society need to style up. Because when I go and molest a child, even if you had given that child contraceptives, what do you expect? Because this is a young person who is growing. Children at the age of 13, 14, remember when you are in Form 2, a very spontaneous, mischievous, confused child who will fall for anything, isn't it? Those are the kids that people are trying to run down. What do you expect that child to do? So what we want to do is that, yes, you build the capacity of the child, but even society needs to take its role. So that when this child is learning, we are actually putting them in a situation where they can continuously learn. We adults need to be respectful to our children and nurture our children, whether it's your real child or not. At the end of the day, just look at this child and say, this would be my brother, this would be my sister, or this would be my son or daughter, and take that role as an adult to actually guide these youngsters. Because I think if they get the the guidance, they engage, they ask questions, and they give you the opportunity to actually answer. Just allow me to give one experience we had when we were collecting data. For the first time, we went to the universities. And we wanted to have focused group discussions with the boys and the girls, or the young men and the young women. Funny enough, all the universities we went to, both public and private, and we did maybe about 10, 15, the focused group discussions were with the young men. The ladies did not come. For whatever reason you don't know. Yet we are saying that women are empowered. The girl child is empowered, the boy is in trouble. Now, during the discussion, what the young men told us is, you guys are doing a lot of rubbish. Because these girls of ours have no clue of who they are. These are people who, it's like, you just tell them, let's go and, sleep together, and they walk in, it's like they have no idea what's going to happen to them. Now, that's a huge gap where we are concerned. So we must make a concerted effort. It's our duty to educate these children both at home and in school. Yeah.
Education, just like health, is aimed at protecting life and maintaining the quality of life. And to do that, it has just to be responsive to the way health it is. It is. My worry is, for health side, they have accepted that sexual and reproductive health is a huge part to Kenyan teenagers, who are the kids we are targeting. They even created a youth-friendly service for them. They are ready to offer contraceptives for them. For this to happen, we need to agree, even in education side, that age appropriateness has changed 50 years from when it was to now. The kids are aware. They just need to be directed. So for education, what are the challenges that you're facing to make it age appropriate, to adhere to the new age appropriateness? Because they're aware. People know about condoms. People know about contraceptives. They are doing all these things in the village, down under the trees and everywhere. What really is the challenge? Something tangible that is actually the challenge.
The first thing is that Kenya, in terms of education, I can say for sure that we have said we are not going to use comprehensive sexuality education. We have engaged. I have gone out of the country. I've been sponsored by UNICEF, UNESCO. We have agreed. If you want anybody to listen to you in the education sector, human sexuality. But like we've seen us discussing, they are the same issues. But the question you bring is right, that you're asking us, since health have already taken up giving the contraceptives, why don't we accept that in education? I'll tell you why it's difficult for education. For the reason that we have the biggest responsibility to synchronize between culture, modernity, morality, and anything else that you can pick up. Now we are 44 tribes. Each one of us has an inclination to what they think life should be and what they think right and wrong should be in terms of young people being brought up. So we have to synchronize all these things. And yes, we do agree. I mean, even when we are dealing with issues of HIV and AIDS, the way we'll handle it in education is not the same way that health will handle. And we need to appreciate that. That constitution that tells us to protect the child until the child is 18 years suffices for all of us. However, we have different roles. And so that is why education says there is a role that education can play, but there is also a responsibility that health may have to play. And really, when we are sitting in our discussions, I think, as I said earlier, we will not be able to tell a teacher in class, go to class and start teaching the use of condoms. There's a time for everything, all right? I do appreciate that children may start having sex early. That doesn't mean they should be not taught what they should not do at the ages they should not handle. Because, if I was comfortable that my 9-year-old actually is telling me, Mom, I'm going to pick up condoms because I would die. I am actually in the years of the 50s that you're talking about, because I'm in my early 50s. But it doesn't change. Morality does not change despite the number of years. And so I think we need to appreciate that. And you see, it is that moral standing that makes you the better human being, or that human being that you want a role model to look like. So it starts with each one of us based on what we are taught. We should be able to give you the skills to make the right decisions, get the right beliefs. In terms of culture, we are appreciating that culture is something we found, isn't it? But there is a procedure through which we can help others to learn, so that at the end of the day, you appreciate where, you see, in my community, I am Luya. You don't disturb the ancestors, okay? So that is where that old man of the hundreds is. So you must find a way to bridge that gap reasonably, with respect, to bring it to them that there is a new move. And that is why when you look at, for instance, FGM, we were able to sit with the teams that are doing this work. We've done materials, we've done what? And we're saying it is important for us to engage the older generation, even as we empower the younger generation, because tradition has not changed. The young do not talk at the old. It was the other way around. But now we have to bring this old person to remember that now there is a generation, I don't know whether you are XYZ now, I lost count, but there's a generation that is different, and you now need to begin listening to them, and it's working. So it may be a slow process, but I think for me, there are certain boundaries that as education we cannot explicitly come and say that this is what you should be able to do, because we have the right to protect that child. Okay. But health, depending on the circumstance, that they are dealing with, they may go a step further than we people may do in education.
Okay, we'll take a break from that point, but when we come back, we'll continue with this discussion. It's human sexuality education for Kenya, but comprehensive sexuality education is actually the underlying theme or the underlying discussion when it comes to these issues of sexuality education. Let's take a look at this week's myth or fact, and then when we come back, we continue with this discussion.
Comprehensive sexuality education encourages youth to engage in sexual activities. Myth. The idea of comprehensive sexuality education is to provide young people with information about their sexuality in order for them to make informed decisions about their sexual and reproductive health. Studies have shown that sex education programs do not increase sexual activity nor lead youth to engage in them at an earlier stage, but rather such programs help youth to delay sexual initiation.